Good morning. I'm sorry that we have once again been beset by technical issues. For the past few weeks, we've had a couple of issues with sound, and Michael and I spent hours here yesterday working on the sound and trying to get it just right, and we did finally get it right, and it worked through sound checks and tests and everything. And then did a sound check again this morning, and it was still working, but what we had not planned on was the internet going out in the middle of the service. So it just goes to prove that whenever we have our best laid plans, that's the best way to make God laugh. So thank you for your patience and your understanding as we try to work this out and bring church to everyone worshiping from home. I did want to share a bit of our service with you this morning in the form of my sermon, even though we couldn't share the whole service. So I share it with you now. In the name of God, through whom we live and move and have our being. Amen. Not too long ago, I suppose because we are gluttons for punishment and had not experienced 2020 fully yet, Michael and I started watching The Handmaid's Tale. Pretty much that's how our TV viewing typically goes. After everyone in the world has been talking about some show for a few years, we'll finally decide that perhaps we should watch it too. Then several months or maybe even a year or two later, we'll actually watch it. The story of The Handmaid's Tale reimagines our present existence as a dystopian reality, where the United States has been overtaken by a theocratic pseudo-Christian regime. Birth rates around the world had plummeted to near zero, and panic had struck about the future of humanity. In this new American theocracy, women who have proven to be fertile become enslaved to help breed children for the ruling class. These women are called handmaids, and the show follows the story of one of these women and her friends and their experiences. In one of the many striking scenes, we're told the story of her early experience going through brainwashing. As a way of trying to subdue these women, a passage from the gospel that we read this morning was often quoted to them. But it was only ever quoted in part. Their overseers would say, "Blessed are the meek," just after cattle prodding a woman for failing to be sufficiently meek. Our heroine, however, had read the Bible, and she finished the sentence, "For they will inherit the earth." Of course, her knowing that part of the verse didn't play well with her captors. She was punished mercilessly for quoting the rest. It is a parable about the dangers of those who proclaim biblical literalism, how small quotes almost never capture the whole or even enough of the story, enough of the greater message to be genuinely useful. But now here we are with 2 weeks in a row where the message of Jesus is so clear and unambiguous. Last week we had the 2 great commandments. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul and mind. And the second, which is like unto it, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. And this week we have a similarly clear approach to understanding God's vision for us. The clarity this week, however, isn't a simple what you see is what you get sort of thing. What's clear is that God's vision for us is so different from our own vision for ourselves that it's almost just the opposite. It is enough to turn the world around. I love that this reading, this selection from the Sermon on the Mount called the Beatitudes, is what we read on All Saints Sunday, 2 of the 3 years of our lectionary cycle. We talk about the saints, both those who are known to the whole church and those who are known only to ourselves in the quietness of our experience. We talk about them as a great cloud of witnesses. But witnesses to what? I would say that they stand out in our minds as witnesses to another way. While so much of the world might seem only focused on itself, on its own benefit and its own continuing, these witnesses we remember today stand out for caring about more than themselves. They stand out, if nothing else, for existing beyond themselves. And they do exist beyond themselves in their own limited experiences. Because we've remembered them here today. They live on in memory and in influence. They live on in the love that they've left behind. The marriage of these two lessons occurring back to back is profound. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. And let the love of God turn the world around. Because the truth is, if you really commit yourself to living according to those two great commandments that we heard last week, the turning the world around that Jesus preached about this week will be the natural outcome. It's like the adage about caring for the forgotten and the downtrodden, providing a meal for the men at the St. Paul's shelter in Patterson, or buying a voucher to support our local food pantries, collecting Christmas presents for the children of incarcerated parents. None of these things is going to turn the world around on its own in one fell swoop. But each of them has the power to turn the world around for at least one person. It can, of course, turn the world around for the one who has been given a rare kindness. But if we come at it with the right mindset, it can also turn the world around for those of us who give too. It can reorient us to the needs of others. It may not feel like we're changing the world when we engage in simple acts of charity, but that's the only way that the world does change. Through the actions of those who mean to change it, even if only in part. Think about these saints that we honor today. Certainly the famous ones, the ones who have churches named after them, the ones who were written about in books. But also the ones whose names and memories are held only in our hearts. None of them is perfect. But the common thread through them is that they all did something. They loved someone. They touched some life and made the world a little bit better place in some way. If we commit to loving the Lord our God with all of our hearts and souls and minds, and loving our neighbors as ourselves, we will too. We will change the world. We will help God turn the world around. Thanks be to God. Amen.